The alleyway smelled like warm concrete and soft sunlight spilling through tangled wires. You kick small stones down the empty road, listening to cicadas scream above the rooftops. An old bicycle leaned beside a vending machine, its basket filled with grocery bags. And somewhere beyond the hillside houses, the ocean shimmered through the heat. You held an orange soda against your cheek, trying to cool down from the afternoon, then laughed because the bottle cap flew farther than either of us expected. Laundry drifted from second floor balconies, white shirts moving in the summer wind, while distant train sounds echoed softly from somewhere near the coastline. The mirror on the curve of the road reflected clouds too bright to stare at, and every passing breeze through the alley carried flower petals across the pavement. You asked why summer afternoons feel slower in towns close to the sea. I watched shadows moving across stone walls and thought maybe he'd stretch as time itself. A radio played from an open window nearby, old pop songs fading in and out, mixed with the sound of dishes clattering inside somebody's kitchen. The sky above the harbor looked enormous, towering white clouds over blue water, and somehow the whole neighborhood felt hidden from the rest of the world. There are afternoons too quiet to explain, orange soda sweating in warm hands, telephone poles humming in the sunlight, an ocean wind drifting uphill. Afternoons where nothing extraordinary happens, yet years later they remain perfectly clear, like reflections trapped inside roadside mirrors along forgotten summer streets. And even now, whenever sunlight flickers through leaves, I remember flower shadows dancing softly across white concrete walls. You sat on the stone steps near the shrine path, watching dragonflies above the weeds. The soda bottles beside your shoes still cold from the vending machine. Somewhere downhill children laugh near the harbor, their voices carried by the wind. And every rooftop in the distance glowed gold beneath the afternoon sun. You told me certain places feel untouched, as if time avoids them intentionally. I looked toward the narrow coastal roads and almost believed you. The breeze became softer near evening, caught shadows stretching across the town, while the sea beyond the houses turned silver beneath the fading light. Maybe happiness feels exactly like this, a summer afternoon without urgency. No destinations, no explanations, just sunlight moving slowly through familiar streets. Maybe memory protects moments like these, because nothing tried too hard to matter. The orange soda shadows on the wall still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting summer clouds, frozen above quiet seaside roads. The cicadas still echo through the alleyways, the laundry still moves in the warm breeze, and somewhere along that hillside street we are still watching sunlight flicker gently across the town below. Eventually the clouds drifted toward evening. The harbor softened beneath golden light, but the smell of warm stone and orange soda stayed with me long after summer ended. The telephone wires sang above the alleyway, soft humming beneath the afternoon heat. You walked ahead, kicking fallen leaves, though it was still the middle of summer. Sunlight poured across old concrete walls, covered in climbing orange flowers, and every narrow staircase leading downhill seemed to disappear into the sea. A delivery scooter passed us slowly, leaving the smell of gasoline and sunshine, while somewhere near the harbor station a crossing bell rang in the distance. You stopped beside a tiny fruit stand, buying peaches wrapped in thin paper, then smiled because the old woman there remembered your name immediately. The wind grew stronger near the hilltop, moving through telephone wires overhead, their quiet metallic sound blending gently with cicadas hidden in the trees. You held one peach against the sunlight, inspecting it like treasure, juice running down your fingers before you even took a bite. An open classroom window down the street released piano scales into the air, some student practicing the same melody again and again through summer break. The town below us shimmered quietly, blue rooftops beside the coastline, and every passing cloud shadow rolled slowly across the ocean. There are sounds that belong only to summer, telephone wires and coastal wind, piano notes escaping classroom windows, and peaches ripening in paper bags. Sounds so ordinary, nobody notices them while living inside them. Yet years later they return suddenly with impossible clarity. And even now, whenever a warm wind shakes electric lines, I remember sunlight scattered across the alley like broken pieces of glass. You sat beneath the shade of a persimmon tree, watching buses climb narrow roads. The peach juice stained your fingertips softly, sticky in the afternoon heat. Far below us, the harbor sparkled endlessly, fishing boats drifting through white sunlight, and every rooftop antenna in town tilted slightly toward the sea breeze. You asked whether people ever realize they're inside the memories they'll miss later. I listened to the wires singing overhead and wished afternoons could answer questions. The shadows stretched longer near evening, clouds turning pale gold above the mountains, while somewhere behind the neighborhood shrine wind chimes rang through open windows. Maybe summer survives through sound first, before photographs, before words, before faces begin fading. Maybe that's why quiet afternoons heard afterward, because they never announce their ending. The wind passing through the telephone wires still exists somewhere inside me, born beneath drifting coastal clouds, frozen above quiet hillside streets. The peaches still ripen beside the fruit stand, the piano still echoes from classroom windows, and somewhere along that narrow road we are still walking there together, listening to summer move softly through the humming wires above us. Eventually, the sunlight faded behind the hills, the harbor darkened into evening blue, but the sound of wind through telephone wires stayed with me long after sunset. Flip-flop slap softly against the hill road as you walked ahead beneath orange clouds. The pavement still warm from afternoon sunlight radiated heat through the evening air. A tiny grocery shop near the intersection displayed watermelons beneath striped awnings, and somewhere behind the telephone pole cicadas screamed without slowing down. You carried a plastic bag filled with rum and bottles, their glass clinking together gently, while the ocean below the town reflected streaks of fading gold. An old man watered flowers beside his doorway, nodding quietly as we passed. The hose water shimmered across the pavement like melted pieces of sky. The breeze grew cooler near the shrine stairs, moving through bamboo fences softly, and every shadow stretching across the alley looked longer than before. You stopped to fix the strap on your sandal, laughing at how cheaply it was made, then asked whether summer evenings feel lonely or simply too beautiful to trust. Far below us, baseball practice echoed faintly from a school beside the harbor, mixed with scooter engines and distant waves rolling against the seawall. The sky slowly deepened into violet clouds, glowing pink at their edges, and all the tiny apartment windows downtown began turning on one by one. Their sounds belonging only to summer, flip-flops on hillside pavement, glass bottles clinking in plastic bags, and baseball games beyond the sea. Sounds so ordinary, nobody notices them while they last. Yet years later they return suddenly, like sunlight through closed eyelids. And even now, whenever evening wind cools the streets, I remember your footsteps echoing softly down the coastal hill road. We sat beside the vending machines afterward, sharing peach soda beneath the trees, the metal bench still warm from sunlight against the backs of our legs. You watched airplanes crossing slowly overhead, tiny silver lights against deepening blue, then whispered that some evenings feel endless even while disappearing. The grocery store owner closed his shutters nearby, their rattling sound rolling through the alley, while fireflies flickered briefly near the grass at the edge of the road. You leaned back against the bench quietly, listening to cicadas fade with the light, and somehow the entire town below us felt smaller than memory itself. Maybe growing up happens like evening, gradually, without announcement, until suddenly the sky looks different. Maybe that's why summer hurts afterward, because it disappears so gently. The sound of flip-flops on the hill road still exists somewhere inside me, warm beneath fading sunset clouds, frozen above the seaside town. The ramune bottles still clink together softly, the cicadas still echo through the alleys, and somewhere along that quiet hillside we are still walking there together, listening to evening settle slowly across the The sound of footsteps on warm pavement stayed with me all summer long. The bus stop bench still held the afternoon heat, even after the sunlight softened. You sat swinging one leg absent-mindedly, holding frozen lemon tea against your forehead. A faded route map fluttered in the wind, taped crookedly beside the timetable. And somewhere beyond the apartment rooftops, the ocean reflected pale evening light. Children carrying swim bags across the street, leaving wet footprints near the crossing, while cicadas screamed from hidden trees, like they were trying to outlast summer itself. You peeled the label from the bottle slowly, rolling it into tiny paper rings, then laughed because the condensation kept dripping onto your skirt. A delivery truck rattled past the station road, smelling faintly of cardboard and fruit, and every traffic mirror near the intersection caught pieces of glowing clouds. You asked whether certain temperatures can become memories on their own. I looked at the heat rising from the pavement and thought maybe this one already had a basketball bound somewhere downhill, echoing through the narrow streets, mixed with television sounds drifting softly from open apartment windows. The breeze carried barbecue smoke uphill from families gathering near the riverbank, and suddenly the whole neighborhood felt suspended inside golden light. There are evenings made entirely from warmth, frozen lemon tea and tired hands, bus stop benches after long afternoons, and when moving through quiet streets, evenings where nobody says anything important, yet everything feels impossible to forget, because summer rests briefly on ordinary places before disappearing. And even now, whenever cold bottles sweat in warm air, I remember sunset gathering slowly around the empty bus stop. The final local bus arrived nearly empty, its windows glowing pale orange. You watch it leave without standing up, as if there was nowhere urgent to be. Cloud shadows stretched across the harbor, turning the water silver blue, and every rooftop antenna beyond the town tilted gently toward the evening wind. You rested your head against the timetable sign, listening to insects hidden in the grass, then asked if peaceful moments feel sad because they never stay long enough. The lemon tea finally lost its ice completely, warm droplets sliding down the bottle, while somewhere behind the station buildings, train brakes screeched against metal rails. Maybe summer survives through sensations, sticky hands, warm benches, cold drinks against sunburned skin. Maybe memory protects temperatures the same way photographs protect faces. The frozen lemon tea beneath the bus stop still exists somewhere inside me, bright beneath slow-moving evening clouds, frozen beside quiet station roads. The cicadas still cry from hidden trees, the buses still pass through golden light, and somewhere along that sleepy avenue, we are still sitting there together. stopped running downtown. The streets cold beneath the stars, but the warmth trapped inside that evening air stayed with me long after summer ended. Sunlight spilled across the staircase to the harbor, broken shapes through tangled leaves. You walked carefully down the stone steps, tracing rusted railings with your fingertips. Below us, fishing boats drifted quietly, white paint glowing against blue water. And every rooftop in the coastal town looked softened by the afternoon haze. An old cat slept beside the mailbox, ignoring bicycles rolling past. While somewhere near the harbor market, a radio played and cut through static. He stopped halfway down the staircase suddenly to watch swallows circling overhead, then smiled because the ocean wind kept stealing your words away. The handrails burned warm beneath our palms, still holding heat from the sunlight. And every flower pot beside the houses overflowed with summer color. A woman hanging laundry on a balcony sang softly without realizing it, her voice drifting through the narrow streets like another part of the weather. You bought shaved ice from a tiny stand, blue syrup staining your tongue, and laughed because the vendor gave us too many napkins for the heat. Far below us, the harbor sparkled endlessly, lights scattering across the water, and all the distant ferry horns sounded slower in the heavy air. There are staircases leading directly into memories, stone paths above quiet harbors, sunlight tangled in telephone wires, and shaved ice melting too fast. Places where summer feels permanent, even while disappearing moment by moment, because the sea keeps shining as though nothing could ever change. And even now, whenever sunlight flickers through leaves, I remember your footsteps echoing softly down the harbor staircase. The shadows stretched longer near evening, crossing walls covered in ivy. Children chased dragonflies beside the shrine gate, while bells rang faintly from the docks. You leaned against the railing quietly, watching clouds drift beyond the bay, then asked whether towns near the ocean always feel slightly nostalgic. I looked toward the endless blue water, moving gently against the harbor stones, and thought maybe the sea teaches places how to remember things slowly. The shaved ice had already melted completely, sweet water dripping through the paper cup, while somewhere behind the hillside houses, wind chimes answered the breeze. Maybe summer afternoons feel cinematic because light changes so slowly. You can actually notice time passing across walls and staircases. Maybe that's enough to make people emotional. The sunlight on the staircase to the harbor still exists somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting coastal clouds, frozen above the sleeping town. The swallows still circle through warm air, the fishing boats still rock below the summer sky. Eventually evening covered the harbor completely. The stone steps cooled beneath the wind, but the sunlight scattered across those railings stayed with me long after sunset. The popsicles melted faster than expected, dripping onto the concrete seawall. You sat swinging your legs above the harbor, watching sunlight dance across the water. Fishing boats drifted beyond the breakwater, white gulls circling through the heat, and every passing breeze from the ocean carried the smell of salt and sunscreen. A convenience store bag beside your sandals rustled softly in the wind, filled with ramen bottles, magazines, and snacks we didn't really need. You laughed when sticky syrup covered your fingers, turning them pink in the sunlight, then wiped them absent-mindedly against the sleeve of your oversized shirt. Far behind us, the coastal road shimmered, scooters weaving through sleepy traffic, while somewhere uphill from the station, wind chimes rang through open windows. You asked if oceans ever become ordinary for people who live beside them. I watched light scatter across the harbor and quietly hoped the answer was no. Children chased crabs near the rocks below, their voices swallowed by the waves, and every cloud drifting above the town looked too soft to be real. A train crossed the coastline slowly, silver against the afternoon sea, its reflection breaking apart gently inside the moving water. Their afternoons carried by the ocean breeze, melted popsicles on warm sea walls, sunlight trapped inside glass bottles, and waves repeating themselves endlessly. Afternoons where summer feels infinite, even while disappearing second by second, because the sea keeps shining as though nothing could ever end. And even now, whenever salt air reaches quiet streets, I remember syrup running down your hands beside the bright blue harbor. The sunlight deepened slowly toward evening, turning the water pale gold. You leaned backward against the railing, closing your eyes against the wind. Somewhere behind the harbor market, a trumpet player practiced alone, the melody drifting through the heat like something half remembered. You said some places stay beautiful because nobody tries to improve them. I looked toward the faded seawall paint and thought maybe you were right. The melted popsicle sticks beside our shoes rolled slightly in the sea breeze, while fishing lines swayed beside the docks under the glowing afternoon sky. Maybe happiness feels temporary on purpose, like cold things melting in sunlight, like waves disappearing against concrete, like summer's ending too gently to notice. Maybe that's why we remember them forever. The melted popsicles on the seawall still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath endless coastal sunlight, frozen beside the afternoon harbor. The scatter endlessly across the ocean below. Eventually, the harbor faded into evening blue. The fishing boats returned toward shore, but the smell of salt water and fruit syrup stayed with me long after sunset. Cicadas scream behind the bakery all afternoon, hidden somewhere in the maple trees. You pushed open the glass door slowly, letting warm sunlight spill across the floor. The smell of fresh bread filled the tiny shop, sweet butter drifting through the air, and every tray behind the counter fogged the windows with soft heat. An old radio played weather forecast quietly beside handwritten menu signs, while outside bicycles rolled past slowly across the sleepy shopping street. You bought lemon cream pastries for both of us, carrying the paper bag carefully, then smiled because the baker added an extra one without charging anything. The alley beside the bakery held cool shadows, relief from the heavy afternoon heat, and somewhere above the apartment rooftops, laundry fluttered against the blue sky. You sat beneath the vending machine awning, balancing pastries on your knees, powdered sugar catching sunlight each time the wind shifted softly. A crossing signal echoed near the station, repeating through the distant heat, while children carrying baseball gloves ran laughing toward the riverbank. You asked why bakeries feel nostalgic even in towns we've never visited. I listened to cicadas behind the building and thought maybe bread smells like memory. There are afternoons hidden inside small bakeries, warm bread beneath humming ceiling fans, paper bags folded beside cold drinks, and cicadas crying beyond the alley. Afternoons where ordinary kindness lingers longer than anyone expects, because small moments settle quietly into places the heart keeps returning to. And even now, whenever warm bread meets summer air, I remember powdered sugar drifting softly through the bakery shadows. The sunlight shifted toward evening, slowly stretching gold across the pavement. You leaned against the brick wall quietly, watching clouds drift above the station. The pastries had already softened in the heat, cream melting through the layers, while somewhere farther down the shopping street, festival lanterns were being hung. You told me certain afternoons feel handmade, as though someone arranged every detail carefully. I looked toward the glowing bakery windows and almost believed it too. The cicadas finally quieted near sunset, leaving only the sound of passing trains and the soft rustle of paper bags moving gently in the evening breeze. Maybe nostalgia begins through scent, warm bread, butter melting in heat, and paper bags against your fingertips. Maybe memory simply follows whatever makes people feel safe. The sound of cicadas behind the bakery still exists somewhere inside me, the alley trees. Eventually, the bakery lights flickered on the station road, cold beneath evening wind. But the smell of lemon cream and warm bread stayed with me long after sunset. Glass bottles rolled softly in the bicycle basket. Each time the wheels hit cracked pavement, you pedaled slowly down the riverside road, hair moving wildly in the summer wind. The afternoon sun reflected off the guardrails, bright enough to make us squint, and every patch of tall grass beside the path bent gently toward the water. A baseball cap hung from your handlebar, swinging with every turn, while somewhere near the bridge crossing, a radio played from an open truck window. You laughed when one of the Ramune bottles clinked louder than the others, then said the sound reminded you of summer festivals from childhood. The river carried sunlight endlessly downstream, breaking apart beneath passing clouds, and every bicycle parked beside the convenience store cast long shadows across the concrete. You stopped near a row of vending machines, still cold from the air conditioning inside. The soda cans glittered beneath fluorescent light like tiny pieces of treasure. A train crossed overhead on rusted tracks, a shadow passing briefly over the road, while cicadas screamed from trees nearby without ever seeming to tire. You asked if people notice happiness only after it's already gone. I listened to the bottles knocking together softly and wished I knew how to answer. There are afternoons hidden inside bicycle rides, glass bottles rolling through wire baskets, warm river winding in sunburned skin, and songs drifting from distant radios. Afternoons where entire summer seem possible, simply because the sky stays blue long enough, and ordinary roads begin to feel like they might lead anywhere. And even now, whenever bottles clink against each other, I remember sunlight flickering endlessly across the riverside pavement. We sat beneath the bridge after a while, feet hanging above the shallow water, the bottle sweating circles onto the concrete as dragonflies skimmed across the river. Somewhere upstream, children practiced trumpet, the melody breaking apart in the wind, and every apartment balcony along the riverbank held towels drying in the sunlight. You leaned backward against the railing, quietly watching clouds drift beyond the city, then whispered that some memories stay warm no matter how much time passes. The bicycles beside us creaked softly, cooling in the shade beneath the bridge, while afternoons slowly stretched toward evening across the endless summer road. Maybe growing older feels like riding downhill, trying to hold on to momentum, even while knowing the road eventually changes direction. Maybe that's why summer afternoons remain, because they never pretend to last forever. The glass bottles rolling in the bicycle basket still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting riverside clouds, frozen beside the summer road. The vending machines still glow beneath the bridge, the train shadows still pass across paper fence rested on the empty festival bench, forgotten after the fireworks ended. You sat beneath strings of lantern light, pulling bobby pins from your hair slowly. The river beside the shrine reflected colors, red and gold trembling through the dark, and every food stall closing for the night released warm smoke into the breeze. A child carried a goldfish bag carefully, walking beside tired parents, while somewhere beyond the crowded bridge train lights crossed the summer town. You folded your yukata sleeves neatly, trying not to wrinkle the fabric, then laughed because the sandals kept slipping off your heel. The festival drums faded into distance, soft echoes beyond apartment rooftops, and every paper lantern above the pathway moved gently in the night wind. You held a melting strawberry candy apple, sticky against your fingertips, the sugar shining under the lights like tiny pieces of glass. A bicycle passed along the riverside road, bell ringing once before disappearing, while somewhere uphill from the station wind chimes answered the breeze. You asked whether festivals feel nostalgic even while they're still happening. I watched reflections move across the river and thought maybe summer already knows it's temporary. There are nights folded inside festival grounds, paper fans left on wooden benches, lantern light drifting above the river, and fireworks smoke trapped in warm air. Nights where people walk slower than usual, as if trying not to disturb the moment, because even crowded places can feel fragile in summer. And even now, whenever lanterns glow beside water, I remember your sandals tapping softly across the riverside path. The final fireworks had already faded, leaving silver smoke above the town. You leaned against the bridge railing quietly, watching reflections break with the current. Food vendors stacked folding chairs nearby, their radios humming baseball scores, and every puddle beside the shrine entrance held tiny pieces of lantern light. You whispered that some memories stay bright because they disappear too quickly. I looked toward the empty festival stalls and suddenly understood what you meant. A paper fence beside the bench lifted slightly in the wind, while distant laughter drifted farther away toward the sleeping streets. Maybe summer festivals survive differently, not through photographs, but through sound and temperature, through smoke and river wine. Maybe that's why certain nights return suddenly, years after they end. The paper fans left on the festival bench still exists somewhere inside me, right beneath drifting lantern light, frozen beside the summer river. The goldfish bags still shimmer in the dark, the train lights still pass beyond the bridge, and somewhere along that quiet riverside we are still sitting there together, listening to fire stood with one hand on the handlebars, the other shielding your eyes from sunlight. Tall grass bent beside the narrow road, silver in the evening breeze, and every puddle left from yesterday's rain caught pieces of orange clouds. A convenience store seat fluttered from your basket, caught between cold drink cans, while somewhere behind the baseball field an announcer called the final inning. You slowed near the pedestrian bridge, watching swallows circle above the water, then smiled because the wind made the whole city smell like summer. An old couple walked tiny dogs nearby, their shadows stretching across the pavement, and every apartment balcony along the river held towels drying in the light. You bought peach soda from a riverside machine, still cold against your palms. The metal buttons warmed by sunlight burned slightly beneath your fingertips. A train crossed the bridge beyond downtown, its reflection breaking in the current, while children chased dragonflies near the grass beside the embankment. You asked why evening skies feel emotional at the end of hot afternoons. I watched orange lights slide across the river and thought maybe colors remember things too. There are evenings carried by bicycle wheels, tangerine skies above quiet rivers, cold soda cans sweating in baskets, and wind moving through tall grass. Evenings where summer feels endless because the sunlight refuses to disappear, stretching itself across the city for a few minutes longer. And even now, whenever sunset turns clouds orange, I remember bicycle tires humming softly along the riverside path. We stop beneath the bridge eventually, leaning our bikes against the railing, the river below us carrying sunlight toward the distant harbor. You rested your chin on folded arms, watching birds drift across the water, then whispered that some evenings feel borrowed, like they were never meant to last. The peach soda had already gone warm, tiny bubbles fading near the rim, while somewhere beyond the station buildings festival music began rising into the air. The city lights flickered on gradually, mixing with the final sunlight as warm wind continued moving softly across the bike path grass. Maybe growing older feels like sunset, beautiful because it disappears slowly, giving people enough time to notice it while it happens. Maybe that's why summer evenings hurt afterward. The tangerine skies above the bike path still exist somewhere inside me, right beneath drifting evening clouds, frozen beside the riverside road. The swallows still circle above the water, the bicycle wheels still hum through warm wind, and somewhere along that glowing pathway we are still riding there together, watching sunlight stretch endlessly across the summer river. Eventually the sky faded into deep blue, the bridge lights reflected in the water, but the smell of warm grass glass and peach soda stayed with me long after sunset. Wind chimes rang above the convenience store entrance. Soft glass notes through the afternoon heat. You stood choosing flavored ice cups slowly, trying to decide between peach or lemon. The parking lot shimmered beneath the sunlight, warm air rising from the asphalt, and every passing bicycle near the crosswalk cast thin shadows toward the river. An employee restocked cold noodle shelves quietly while tiny fans rotated near the counter. The smell of sunscreen and instant ramen drifted through the fluorescent aisles. You finally picked the peach flavor, smiling, holding it against your sunburned cheek. Then laughed because the plastic spoon snapped before the first bite. Outside, the clouds moved slowly above the rooftops, huge and bright against endless blue, and every apartment balcony facing west held blankets drying in the breeze. You sat beside the vending machines afterward, feet tapping lightly against the curb, the peach ice already melting quickly in the heavy summer air. A truck carrying fireworks boxes passed us, heading toward the riverside grounds, while cicadas screamed from telephone poles without ever losing energy. You asked why convenience stores feel comforting during lonely afternoons in summer. I listened to the wind chimes above the entrance and thought maybe routine sounds feel safe. There are afternoons carried by tiny sounds, wind chimes above convenience stores, plastic spoons breaking and melting ice, and bicycles humming past warm streets. Afternoons where entire summers hide quietly inside fluorescent aisles and cold drink shelves, as if ordinary places remember people better than grand ones ever could. And even now, whenever wind shakes hanging glass chimes, I remember peach ice melting slowly beside the glowing storefront. The sunlight softened toward evening gradually, turning clouds pale orange near the horizon. You rested your elbows on your knees quietly, watching traffic lights change beside the road. Children carrying festival posters ran laughing through the shopping street, and every open apartment window nearby released television sounds into the air. You whispered that some afternoons feel unfinished, like songs fading before the final chorus. I looked toward the glowing store windows and suddenly didn't want evening to arrive. The wind chimes continued ringing softly each time the warm breeze shifted, while melted peach ice dripped slowly across the curb beside our shoes. Maybe nostalgia begins through repetition. Tiny sounds, cold drinks, store lights glowing in summer heat. Maybe that's why ordinary afternoons return first, when people miss the past. The wind chimes above the convenience store still exist somewhere inside me, right beneath drifting afternoon clouds, frozen beside the shopping street. The bicycles still pass through warm sunlight, the peach ice still melts too quickly, and somewhere outside that tiny storefront, we are still sitting there together, listening to glass chimes echo softly through the summer wind. Eventually the sky deepened into evening blue, the parking lot cooled beneath the breeze, but the sound strawberry milk cartons rested beside the riverbank, cold against the sun-warmed concrete. You sat with your shoes half untied, watching dragonflies skim above the water. The afternoon sky stretched endlessly blue, thin clouds drifting toward the harbor, and every bicycle crossing the bridge nearby cast moving shadows through the grass. A baseball rolled from the empty field, slowly stopping near the fence beside us, while somewhere behind the apartment blocks a radio played old summer songs. You poked the straw through the carton carefully, then laughed when pink drops spilled onto your hand, the sweetness mixing with the smell of river wind and hot pavement. Children chased each other near the embankment stairs, plastic sandals slapping against stone, and every patch of tall grass beside the water bent softly beneath the breeze. You asked why rivers make afternoons quieter, even inside crowded towns. I watched sunlight scatter across the current and thought maybe moving water softens everything. A train crossed the bridge in the distance, its windows flashing silver briefly, while cicadas screamed from hidden trees like they were trying to outsing the heat. The milk carton sweaty rings onto the ground, tiny circles fading in the sunlight as warm wind drifted slowly across the empty baseball field. There are afternoons hidden beside rivers, strawberry milk beneath bright summer skies, dragonflies tracing circles above the water, and radios playing through open windows. Afternoons where ordinary sweetness lingers longer than people expect, because memory protects small moments better than dramatic ones. And even now, whenever cold drinks sweat in warm air, I remember sunlight trembling softly across the shallow river. The clouds deepened toward evening, gradually turning gold near the horizon. You rested your chin against your knees quietly, listening to distant traffic hum. Someone practiced trumpet from an apartment balcony, the melody drifting over the water, and every ripple beside the embankment caught pieces of fading light. You whispered that certain summers feel unfinished, like stories missing their last page. I looked toward the bridge beyond the river, and suddenly didn't want the evening to end. The strawberry milk had already gone warm, sweetness lingering at the bottom, while shadows stretched longer across the grass beside the glowing riverbank. Maybe nostalgia tastes simple, milk cartons, warm air, and afternoons with nowhere important to be. Maybe that's why small memories survive longest. Strawberry milk cartons by the riverbank still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting evening clouds, frozen beside the summer water. The dragonflies still skim across the current, the train lights still cross beyond the bridge, and somewhere along that quiet embankment we are still sitting there together, listening to the river move softly through the golden summer light. Eventually the sunlight faded behind downtown, the cicadas quieted near the bridge. of strawberry milk and river wind stayed with me long after sunset. The baseball nets swayed in the evening breeze beside the practice field after sunset. You sat on the bleachers tying your hair while orange light covered the dirt in gold. The scoreboard still glowed above the outfield, numbers frozen from the final inning, and every bicycle parked near the dugout shined beneath the fading sky. A coach folded metal chairs near the fence, listening to the game recap quietly, while somewhere beyond school rooftops clouds drifted toward the ocean. You spun a baseball between your fingers, slowly watching birds cross above the lights, then smiled because the leather smelled like heat and summer dust. The wind pushed gently through the practice nets, making soft rhythmic sounds, and every whistle hanging from the dugout wall tapped lightly against the wood. You asked why sports fields feel emotional after everyone leaves them behind. I listened to sneakers echo in empty hallways and thought maybe effort leaves memories everywhere. A vending machine buzzed near the entrance gate, sports drinks glowing beneath fluorescent light, while cicadas faded gradually with the arrival of evening. The sky deepened into warm violet, clouds turning pink at the edges, and every apartment window beyond the field caught pieces of sunset. Their evenings hidden inside practice fields, when moving through baseball nets, scoreboards glowing against summer skies, and dirt still warm beneath sneakers. Evenings where growing older feels temporary because the lights haven't turned off yet, as if summer continues quietly inside empty stadiums after games. And even now, whenever wind shakes chain link fences, I remember sunset lingering softly above the silent field. Against the bleacher railing quietly, watching shadows cross the outfield grass. The baseball resting beside your shoe, still carrying traces of dust. Somewhere behind the gymnasium windows, a piano practiced the same melody repeatedly, and every echo across the parking lot felt stretched by the evening air. You whispered that certain places feel alive even when nobody's inside them. I looked toward the swaying practice nets and almost believed they were breathing too. The scoreboard finally dimmed into darkness, one light disappearing after another, while warm wind continued moving softly across the empty field. Maybe memory sounds like this, nets moving in evening wind, whistles forgotten beside dugouts, and footsteps fading across dirt paths. Maybe that's enough to make people nostalgic. The wind moving through the baseball nets still exists somewhere inside me, right beneath drifting sunset clouds, frozen beside the empty field. The scoreboard still glow above the outfield, the bicycles still wait beside the fences, and somewhere along those quiet bleachers, we are still sitting there together, watching summer settle slowly across the practice grounds. Eventually the field lights turned completely off, the cicadas disappeared into the dark, but the sound of wind through the baseball nets stayed with me long after nightfall. Soap bubbles drifted above the crosswalk, catching rainbow colors in the sunlight. You stood waiting for the signal to change, holding iced tea against your wrist. The shopping street shimmered in the heat, awning shadows across the pavement, and every bicycle basket near the station carried groceries and sunflowers home. A child chased bubbles beside the bakery, laughing louder than the traffic sounds, while somewhere above the crowded buildings, clouds moved slowly toward the sea. You brushed loose hair behind your ear quietly, watching reflections in storefront glass, then smiled because the summer wind kept blowing the bubbles sideways. The pedestrian signal played its tiny melody over and over through the afternoon, and every open cafe window nearby released jazz and cold air together. You asked whether cities feel softer in summer, or if people simply slow down. I watched sunlight bounce across passing cars and thought maybe heat changes everything gently. An old bookstore owner watered plants outside, tiny droplets darkening the sidewalk, while scooters rolled through narrow alleys toward the riverside road. The iced tea sweated against your fingers, cold beneath the heavy air, as cicadas screamed from hidden trees beyond the station rooftops. There are afternoons hidden inside shopping streets, so bubbles floating through warm sunlight, crosswalk melodies repeating endlessly, and wind drifting between crowded buildings. Afternoons where ordinary cities glow briefly, like scenes from unfinished films, because summer wraps familiar places inside softer colors and slower time. And even now, whenever bubbles catch afternoon light, I remember reflections trembling softly across the crosswalk pavement. The sky deepened slowly toward evening, clouds turning pale orange near downtown. You leaned against the vending machine quietly, watching trains pass beyond the station. Someone cracked a saxophone from an apartment window, the melody drifting above the traffic, and every passing breeze along the avenue carried the smell of citrus and rain. You whispered that some afternoons feel fragile, like they could disappear too easily. I looked toward the floating soap bubbles and suddenly understood exactly what you meant. The crossing signal changed from red to green, people moving around us slowly, while sunlight stretched longer across the street, before finally fading into dusk. Maybe memory keeps small details first, bubble reflections, traffic songs, and cold drinks warming in your hands. Maybe that's why ordinary afternoons survive forever. The soap bubbles floating above the crosswalk still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting summer clouds, frozen beside the station road. The cafe windows still glow in the heat, the saxophone still echoes through downtown, and somewhere along that crowded crossing, we are still standing there together, watching bubbles drift softly across the glowing afternoon street. Eventually the traffic lights blurred into evening, the shopping street cooled beneath the breeze, but the sound of bubbles popping in warm sunlight stayed with me long after sunset. Blue ramen caps gathered in the coin tray beside the old vending machine near the pier. harbor shimmered beneath the heat, fishing boats rocking against the docks, and every gull above the seawall drifted lazily through the bright sky. A ferry horn echoed across the bay, slowly, low and distant through the warm air, while somewhere behind the station buildings, children practiced dance routines for the festival. You pressed the cold bottle against your neck, trying to escape the humidity, then laughed because the marble inside refused to fall the first time. The vending machine hummed beneath faded stickers, its white paint warmed by sunlight, and every can visible behind the glass looked brighter in the summer heat. You asked whether people remember summers through colors more than events. I watched sunlight flicker across the blue caps and quietly thought you might be right. A bicycle delivery rider crossed the pier road, leaving tire marks through old puddles, while cicadas screamed from trees uphill without ever seeming exhausted. The sea breeze carried the smell of fried noodles from a stand near the harbor entrance, mixing with salt water and engine smoke beneath the drifting clouds. There are afternoons hidden beside vending machines, blue ramen caps and metal trays, ferry horns crossing the harbor wind, and sunlight trapped inside glass bottles. Afternoons where ordinary colors become permanent, because summer touches them once, then leaves them glowing quietly inside memory forever. And even now, whenever glass bottles knock together softly, I remember sunlight scattering endlessly across the harbor pier. The sky shifted slowly toward evening, gold clouds turning pale above the ocean. You spun one bottle cap between your fingers, watching reflections move across the metal. A stray cat slept beneath the ticket counter, ignoring footsteps near the docks, and every passing ferry beyond the seawall left silver trails through the bay. You whispered that certain afternoons feel lighter, like they belong more to dreams than reality. I looked toward the endless summer water and suddenly understood completely. The ramen bottles beside our shoes sweated circles onto the concrete, while warm winds continued moving softly across the quiet harbor pier. Maybe nostalgia begins through color, blue bottle caps like fairy foam, orange sunlight against seawater. Maybe memory protects whatever shines briefly. The blue ramen caps in the coin tray still exist somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting seaside clouds, frozen beside the afternoon harbor. The vending machine still hums near the pier, the gulls still circle above the seawall, and somewhere along that glowing coastline, we are still standing there together, listening to ferry horns fade slowly across the summer bay. Eventually, the harbor cooled into evening blue. The sunlight disappeared beyond the water, but the smell of ramen and ocean wind stayed with me long after sunset. Hydrangea shadows covered the stone bowl, moving softly beneath the afternoon light. You walked downhill beside the narrow path, tracing cracks between the old concrete steps. The ocean shimmered far below the rooftops, bright enough to blur at the edges, and every telephone pole along the hill buzzed gently in the summer heat. An old garden hose leaked beside the alley, tiny streams running toward the drain, while somewhere beyond the hillside houses a dog barked lazily at passing scooters. You stopped beneath the flower vines quietly, brushing purple petals from your sleeve, then laughed because the wind kept carrying them back again. Cicadas cry from hidden trees above us, louder near the shaded corners, and every mirror placed beside the curves held pieces of drifting clouds. You asked why coastal towns feel slower during afternoons like these. I watched sunlight break through leaves and thought maybe hills stretch time gently. A woman watered plants from her balcony, tiny droplets glowing in the heat, while children chased each other downhill toward the road beside the harbor. The air smelled faintly of salt and stone, mixed with flowers warmed by sunlight, as warm wind drifted softly through the empty summer path. There are afternoons hidden inside hillside towns, hydrangea shadows on stone walls, telephone wires humming in the heat, and sunlight trapped between narrow stairways. Afternoons where the world feels suspended halfway between sky and ocean, as if summer itself paused briefly on the slope above the sea. You sat near the top of the staircase quietly, watching clouds gather over the bay, the flower petals beside your sandals shifting each time the breeze returned. Far below us bicycles crossed tiny streets, their bells fading into the sunlight, and every rooftop beyond the hillside glowed pale gold beneath the sky. You whisper that some places feel untouched, like memories before they happen. I looked toward the ocean below the town and couldn't think of a better answer. The shadow slowly stretched across the path, cooler air arriving from the sea, while cicadas softened one by one with the coming evening light. Maybe beautiful afternoons stay quiet on purpose, so people notice smaller things, flower shadows, warm stone, and wind moving through narrow streets. The hydrangeas kept swaying above the stairway, clouds drifting endlessly over the water, and somewhere inside the glowing hillside town, summer continued without hurrying. No promises, as evening slowly reached the hillside town. You stood near the guardrail overlooking the harbor, holding your cardigan against the breeze. The road downhill glowed with long shadows, warm beneath the fading sunlight, and every rooftop facing west burned orange for a few quiet minutes. An empty scooter rolled past lazily, its engine fading near the coast, while somewhere beyond the distant breakwater gulls drifted through the evening sky. You pointed toward the ocean silently, watching sunlight flicker across the waves, and smiled like you almost remembered something before letting the thought disappear. Sunsets feel lonely, or if people simply become quieter. I watched clouds darken above the harbor and thought maybe both things happened together. Laundry swayed from second floor balconies, white fabric glowing in the breeze, while flower vines climbed old wooden fences near the edge of the road. Far below us, tiny traffic lights blinked red and green against the coast as warm ocean air continued drifting upward through the sleepy neighborhood. There are evenings balanced above seaside towns, tangerine light between utility poles, long shadows crossing downhill roads, and ocean wind cooling the stone steps. Evenings where nothing tries to impress you, yet everything becomes unforgettable, because summer sunsets disappear slowly enough for people to notice them fully. You rested your arms against the railing quietly, listening to insects hidden in the trees, the sky turning softer near the horizon like watercolor spreading through paper. A cat crossed the narrow road behind us, vanishing beneath the flower shadows, while somewhere along the harbor streets bicycle bells echoed faintly uphill. You whispered that certain skies feel familiar, even in places we've never seen before. I looked toward the fading orange clouds and understood exactly what you meant. The final sunlight slipped between the poles, breaking apart across the pavement as evening settled gently over the town without anyone noticing at first. Maybe growing older feels like sunset, warm for a little while longer before colors fade quietly into something softer. The utility poles darken against the sky, the harbor lights flickered below the hillside, and warm evening wind carried the scent of flowers, salt water, and cooling stone. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the ocean kept reflecting the last light, long after the town itself had already fallen into dust by the time the first stars appeared. glory vines wrapped around the mailbox, climbing higher through the summer heat. You leaned against the narrow alley wall, watching clouds drift over the distant bay. The concrete steps still held yesterday's warmth, even beneath the afternoon shade. And every rooftop below the hillside blurred softly in the rising air. A bicycle basket rattled down the slope, filled with groceries and green onions, while somewhere beyond the harbor road a siren echoed faintly toward the sea. You tucked loose hair behind your ears slowly, listening to insects hidden in the vines, then smile because the flowers closed slightly whenever shadows passed. The neighborhood felt half asleep in the heat, curtains moving through open windows, and every tiny garden beside the stairways overflowed with summer color. You asked why afternoons near the ocean always feel longer than expected. I watched sunlight slide across the mailbox pane and thought maybe salt air slows everything down. A white cat slept beneath the hydrangeas, ignoring footsteps near the road, while distant laughter drifted uphill softly from children near the waterfront. The breeze carried the smell of seawater mixed with wet soil and flowers as clouds stretched slowly above the town toward the pale blue horizon. There are afternoons hidden inside hillside alleys, morning glories climbing old mailboxes, cloud shadows drifting over rooftops, and warm wind crossing narrow stairways. Afternoons where silence feels alive, like the town itself is breathing slowly, holding on to summer carefully before evening finally arrives. You sat beside the stone wall, quietly tracing flower petals with your fingertips. The alley below us glowing softly under layers of fading sunlight. A fisherman walked uphill carrying empty buckets, his footsteps echoing against the road, while somewhere near the harbor entrance flags moved lazily above the pier. You whispered that beautiful places feel fragile because they never stay exactly the same. I looked toward the tangled flower vines and let the silence answer for me. The shadows stretched farther through the alley, cooling the pavement little by little as cicadas softened beneath the sky, turning silver near the horizon. Maybe memory grows the same way flowers do, quietly without asking permission, until entire summers bloom inside your chest. The mailbox disappeared beneath the vines, the rooftops faded into evening haze, and warm ocean air continued moving through the sleeping hillside town. No music, no voices, only flower shadows trembling softly against the summer walls. When the first evening lights appeared below the hill, the flowers had already folded inward, waiting quietly for tomorrow's sunlight. The harbor steps smelled like sunlight and seawater, warm beneath the concrete slope, watching ripples spread beneath the boats. The afternoon sky towered endlessly above us, huge clouds drifting toward the coastline, and every fishing rope tied beside the pier moved gently with the tide. An old fan turned inside the bait shop doorway, pushing warm air toward the street, while somewhere farther along the seawall, children chased each other with water guns. You dipped your fingers into the ocean briefly, then flicked seawater toward the sunlight, laughing when tiny droplets sparkled against the air. The heat shimmered above the harbor roads, blurring bicycles in the distance, and every gull crossing over the water left shadows moving across the pier. You asked why certain smells feel permanent even after years disappear. I breathed in salt and concrete quietly and understood before answering. A rusted vending machine near the dock buzzed beneath faded stickers, while festival banners tied to the railing snapped softly in the breeze. The ocean reflected pieces of white clouds breaking apart beneath passing boats as warm wind drifted uphill slowly through the sleeping seaside town. There are afternoons hidden beside harbors, sunlight warming old concrete steps, cloud reflections trembling in seawater, and distant gulls crossing the sky. Afternoons where the world feels unfinished in the most beautiful possible way, because summer leaves certain places glowing long after people walk away. You rested your chin against your knees quietly, listening to waves touch the shore, the boats rocking beneath the sunlight like slow breathing in the heat. Far above us, utility poles stretched uphill, thin against the blue horizon, while flower vines spilled across old fences near the road toward the houses. You whispered that oceans never seem lonely, even when nobody's around them. I looked toward the endless moving water and couldn't stop smiling afterward. The shadows lengthened beside the harbor steps, cooling the storm little by little, as the sky slowly faded from bright blue into softer evening colors. Maybe happiness smells simple: salt water, warm concrete, and sunlight trapped inside sea wind. Maybe that's enough for people to remember forever. The boats drifted farther with the tide, the clouds moved slowly toward the horizon. Warm evening air carried the sound of waves against the harbor wall. No endings, no promises, only sunlight fading carefully across the seaside steps. By the time the gulls disappeared into the sky, the concrete had finally cooled, but the scent of seawater and sunlight still lingered in the wind. Persimmon trees leaned over the summer alley, casting round shadows across the stone road. You stood beneath the branches quietly, watching leaves tremble in the ocean breeze. The hillside town stretched toward the harbor, blue rooftops glowing beneath the sunlight, and every narrow stairway between the houses disappeared into patches of gold. A radio somewhere behind an open window played weather forecast through static, while cicadas filled the afternoon air until the whole of salt and grass mixed with flowers growing through cracked walls. And every bicycle resting beside the fences carry traces of dust from the hill roads. You asked why summer afternoons feel endless in towns overlooking the sea. I watched clouds drifting above the harbor and thought maybe the sky becomes larger here. An old woman watered plants beside her doorway, tiny streams running along the pavement, while wind chimes answered softly from somewhere farther uphill. The sunlight shifted little by little, sliding across the telephone poles as warm shadows stretched through the alley toward the road below. There are afternoons hidden above the coastline, persimmon trees swaying over narrow paths, warm wind crossing hillside rooftops, and clouds floating endlessly toward the ocean. Afternoons where silence feels golden, like the town itself is resting, holding on to summer carefully before evening reaches the harbor. You sat along the stone wall near the steps, listening to insects in the trees. The persimmon beside your shoe rolling slightly whenever the wind returned. Far below us, laundry moved between balconies, white fabric shining against blue sky. And every rooftop facing the water caught pieces of afternoon light. You whispered that some places feel untouched even after thousands of sunsets. I looked toward the glowing hillside road and suddenly understood what you meant. The shadows deepened beneath the trees slowly, cool air arriving from the sea as clouds soften near the horizon into pale shades of silver and orange. Maybe beautiful afternoons never ask for attention. They simply stay quiet long enough for people to notice the wind moving through leaves and sunlight. The persimmon trees continued swaying softly above the sleeping seaside alley, while warm ocean air drifted upward through the tangled summer town. No music, no hurry, only sunlight fading gently across the hillside stones. By the time the sky turned evening blue, the alley had almost fallen silent, except for the sound of leaves moving slowly in the sea breeze. Your sleeves were rolled above sunburned shoulders as we leaned against the harbor fence. The metal railing still warm from daylight pressed softly against our arms. Fishing nets dried beside the warehouses, moving gently in the sea breeze, and every rope tied along the docks smelled faintly of salt and rain. A vending machine blinked near the ferry gate, its lights pale against the afternoon. While somewhere behind the seafood market, workers shouted across stacked crates. You opened a can of cold coffee, slowly steaming never feel lonely, even with ships always arriving. I listened to the harbor chains rattling softly and wished questions had easier answers. A bicycle bell echoed near the station road, mixed with music from a nearby cafe, while children chased each other across the painted dock lines. The sunlight reflected through your sunglasses, tiny sparks of orange and gold, as warm wind carried the smell of fried food from the harbor stalls. There are afternoons carried by the sea breeze, sunburned sleeps beside harbor fences, cold coffee cans sweating in warm hands, and gulls circling above quiet docks. Afternoons where summer feels endless simply because the ocean keeps moving, as if time itself drifts slower near places touched by waves. And even now, whenever salt air reaches crowded streets, I remember sunlight flashing softly across the harbor water. Slowly toward evening, turning pale blue near the horizon. You leaned farther against the railing, watching ferries disappear beyond the bay. A trumpet melody drifted from somewhere uphill, broken apart by the wind, and every apartment window across the harbor glowed faintly beneath the sunset. You whispered that some places feel unfinished, no matter how often people return to them. I looked toward the endless water beyond the docks and thought maybe oceans are like that too. The coffee cans beside our shoes rolled slightly when the breeze strengthened, while distant train tracks shimmered under the fading afternoon light. Nostalgia begins beside water, where movement never really stops, and every wave reminds people how impossible it is to hold time still. Maybe that's why harbors feel emotional, even on ordinary afternoons. The sunburned sleeps by the harbor fence still exists somewhere inside me, bright beneath drifting seaside clouds, frozen beside the warm afternoon sea. The ferries still cross beyond the breakwater, the gulls still circle through glowing skies, and somewhere along that quiet harbor fence, we are still standing there together, listening to the ocean breathe softly through the summer wind. Eventually the sunlight faded beyond the bay. The harbor lights flickered one by one, but the smell of salt water and warm metal railings stayed with me.